It's Friday, which means it's time for another Free Talk Friday video. I just made up that name for this series an hour ago, and I think it's sticking, so I'm gonna stick with it. So anyway, if you are not already subscribed to this channel, subscribe, because on the community tab every Tuesday or Wednesday or so, at least for the month of October, but maybe moving forward if this becomes popular, I open it up to suggestions of subjects that you want me to talk about that are Japanese or anime or translating related, that I could talk about in 10 minutes or less for a more free-form sort of video. And this Friday's video, the most upvoted comment, suggestion for a video to talk about is, why do anime dubs feel the need to westernize characters' names? So the first thing I have to get out of the way is that dubs of anime don't always westernize characters' names. I haven't seen all the anime dubs in existence, but of the anime dubs that I've seen, some of them, like Sailor Moon, Pokemon, they change the characters' names, they westernize them. Musashi and Kojiro became Jesse James, right? Team Rocket. And then Sailor Moon characters, Usagi became Serena, Mamoru became Darien, among other things. But there are certain anime dubs where the characters' names did not change. I did see some of the Fushigi Yugi dub, and they did not change Miyaka or Yui to westernized names. And other snippets of dubs I've seen here and there, they don't change the Japanese names into Western names. So why do they feel the need to change the names to Western names when they do change the names to Western names? I am not in the anime dubbing industry, so I can't give a definite "this is why" answer, but I can give some "this is most likely why" answers. Number one, didn't mean to make this a listicle, but number one, if the anime is going to be released on TV with their target audience being 10 or under, they typically, speaking from a marketing standpoint, they want to make money, and they think, maybe correctly so, maybe incorrectly so, they think that a story will be a lot more accessible to an audience, especially a younger audience, if the names are familiar. If you're watching this story unfold, and then all of a sudden, somebody is called Usagi, and it's this name that's just what? That's a person's name? It's alienating. It takes you out of the story for a minute, because you're what? And then you get back into it. The same is true, I'm just going to pull on Sailor Moon, because it's this one example that I know a lot about. But in the DIC of Sailor Moon, they localized and changed things to the extent that they kind of erased that the girls were even in Japan. I remember when Usagi was eating Nikuman, I think they were. In the dub, they said that they were donuts. They did not look like donuts. They kind of looked like they could have been jelly-filled donuts, but they were Nikuman. But instead of saying, oh, you're eating Nikuman or meat buns, that would have alienated the audience again, because we would have been what's meat buns? So that's the first reason, I think, is that they think that, well, if we keep the names in Japanese, it's just going to be very jarring, and it's going to take people out of the story for a minute while they're trying to process what is this weird word, and then they'll go back in. So that's one reason. Another reason, for me, I'm thinking, if I were going to dub a series, and if I decided to change the names to make them more Western, is I've noticed sometimes in anime dubs, the voice actors, they just do not have good pronunciation when they say the names. It'll be a name like Kakeru, and they'll be Kakeru. It's kind of weird. Or the opposite is true, and they'll actually have good pronunciation of the name, and you'll be speaking English with your mouth in this certain position and pronouncing your R's hard like that, and then all of a sudden you'll be Kakeru in the middle of a sentence, and it just sounds weird, and actually kind of pretentious sometimes if a character pronounces a name correctly in Japanese. So there's that problem, either the voice actor's inability to pronounce the Japanese names properly, or their ability to pronounce the Japanese names properly, and then again you have that alienation. It's sort of oh, this person who shouldn't be able to speak Japanese because they're speaking English, and then now they're speaking, it's just kind of alienating. As I said, it has this sort of disconnecty, jarring sort of effect to it. Another reason that they might change the names to Western names is, as I mentioned earlier, they might just attempt to westernize the entire show and just erase the fact that it takes place in Japan and that these characters are Japanese. Again, I super got that vibe from Sailor Moon. It was weird when in R, like the second series, they they mention Crystal Tokyo and they called it Tokyo, and they finally acknowledged that this show takes place in Tokyo. Like before that, they didn't really acknowledge that it took place in Tokyo or in Japan. They kind of tried to make it seem like it was taking place in North America. So yeah, if you're doing like a more full localization, like erasing the fact that this show takes place in Japan and trying to make it take place in the West for your Western audience to more readily digest it, you're gonna make changes. You're gonna change the Nikuman to donuts, you're going to change Usagi's name to Serena, and you might, remove episodes that are very culturally significant, or you might just kind of take out those scenes that are really culturally significant, to make it very Japanesey to appeal to your Western audience. Do I agree with this philosophy? Not necessarily, and I think that, times are changing. I think when I was a kid, kids back then weren't as sophisticated as kids are today. There wasn't the internet. They wouldn't have known. There wasn't globalization. They wouldn't have known, oh, there's Japan and there's this other culture. And yeah, it's perfectly normal for a person to be named Usagi or Satoshi. Those aren't weird names. Those are legitimate names. And, people would know what Nikuman are. People know, they're so much more knowledgeable now. Both adults and children are so much more knowledgeable about these things now. So I don't think that old wisdom of, we need to Westernize it as much as possible to appeal to a Western audience, I don't think that really applies so much anymore. So yeah, for one thing, I think that old model of, we need to make it as Western as possible to appeal to the audience, I think that's just kind of not really a thing so much anymore, looking at how much more knowledgeable everybody is in the world now about other cultures. The other thing is that, now that anime is big as anime, in the past they had to kind of disguise anime, like, it's a cartoon. And you might not even know it's an anime, because they erased the fact that it's Japanese in any way. They changed the names just to make it a cartoon because it's cheaper than animating a completely new one from scratch. So we'll just steal this anime and pretend that it's American. But now that anime is recognized, and it's really big and it has its own huge fan base for being anime, there's not really a need anymore to mask the fact that it's from Japan and that it's anime. So I think a lot of those old rules of why they would need to Westernize the names just don't really apply anymore. And then for me personally, I don't really see the problem with erasing the fact that it takes place in Japan and that the characters are Japanese if it is a very non-Japan specific kind of story that it really could take place anywhere. And I kind of appreciate the reinventing of things. I saw that fan-made Sailor Moon movie. I'll link it in the description below. But it's really good. You should watch it. But yeah, I liked, they had it take place in New York. So they kind of reimagined a bunch of things. Like Rei, for example, instead of working at a Shinto shrine, she was working at, a psychic shop like we have in the United States. So I kind of liked that. I like that cultural translation of the series that can happen. And again, if the story itself is not inherently very Japanese, I kind of don't see the problem with doing your own spin on it, your own interpretation, erasing the Japaneseness and making it really Western. Except that I feel like if you're going to do that, you might as well just completely recreate the story from scratch altogether, like that fan Sailor Moon movie. So it's I don't have a problem with the concept of taking a story and making it so that it is now American and not Japanese, but I feel like that's a lot of wasted energy if you're doing that with a dub. And then definitely if it is a story that is Japanese, do not erase that it's Japanese, do not change the characters' names. That's my general feeling on it. I think, leave it in Japanese, leave it the way it's supposed to be, especially since, as I mentioned, we have a big fan base for anime now and people that are knowledgeable about Japan or Japanese culture, or at least they want to be knowledgeable about it. And it's doing a disservice to your base, your fan base, if you're going to make a lot of westernizations of this very Japanese thing. So that was my take on Japanese names being westernized in dubs. Again, I'm not in the dubbing industry, so I can't give definite, this is exactly why they do it kinds of answers, but just as a localizer, as a translator, those are my thoughts on the subject. If you want to suggest a topic for me to riff on next Friday, as I said, I usually prompt these things in the community tab on Tuesday, Wednesday or so, and just give me a topic, upvote the topics you like, and maybe I'll make a video about it.